Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another monthly reading wrap up, this time for the month of November. Thank you so much for being here. I actually had to re record this video because the first time around, I don't know what happened. The audio file got so corrupted, it sounded absolutely insane to the point that I couldn't listen to that audio file. So I was like, you know what, maybe it's better to just delete this, forget that it happened, and re-record everything, and hopefully this time around everything sounds as it should. I'm also recovering from a cold, so my voice is still a bit weirdly sounding. Let's say I'm still a bit congested, but I'm sure I'll be fine in a couple of days. Okay, enough rambling, and let me tell you everything about what I read in November. I started November with reading Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake, and if you watched the channel in the past, you know that I talked about this book since last year, since we learned about its existence, basically. I was so excited to read this book, and I cannot believe that I have it, that I read it, and that it was absolutely amazing, but I would expect nothing less from Olivia Blake. Well, I mean, I did read another Olivia Blake book this month that wasn't necessarily my favorite, but we're gonna talk about that in a second. So, Girl Dinner. This is basically Bunny by Mona Awad meets Scream Queens, the iconic TV show with Jamie Lee Curtis, Emma Roberts, Ariana Grande, one of the Jonas Brothers, weirdly, and so many more actors. But this was so campy and funny and weird and so self-aware. I saw some critiques online that people are saying that this is basically white girl problems, but I would argue that this is the point of the book. It's not trying to do something more than that, in my opinion. So, what is happening in Girl Dinner? We are in two points of view throughout the entirety of the novel. On one side, we have Nina, and Nina is a sophomore. She is at this university, and her life is pretty much in shambles, and she thinks that by joining the House, which is one of the most popular sororities on campus, her life will be fixed all of a sudden by joining this sorority, arguably cold, but you kind of are introduced to that aspect later on in the book. The thing is that all of the alumni, or all of the people that were in this sorority in the House when they were at this university, turned out to be very successful people in their own professional careers. We have the example of, actually don't remember her name in the book, but she's this very popular influencer. She's a trad wife basically, but she has a lot of followers, a lot of power and influence and money and stuff like that. And it is just an example of the power that the House has. On the other side, we are following Sloane. Sloane recently, I think it's a year or two ago, gave birth to her first child. She has a daughter, and she is the wife of one of the professors from this university. She has the opportunity to take on some teaching jobs at the same university, and she wants to do that because she wants to get back into the groove of things that she was doing before she had a child. But she's also in the same time very anxious about her kid, what is her daughter going to do without her. And this book talks a lot about women's insecurities and motherhood, and how society is pressuring women into all of these unreasonable and unattainable things. And I think that this book is really good at commenting on those things. I also really liked the ending. It is very open-ended, and it just leaves you wondering, I'm actually still thinking about the ending and what does that signify in the grand scheme of things, but I did think that this book was really cool. Obviously, you have the iconic by now Olivia Blake writing style, and I think it's one of the things that you either love or hate. I personally tend to really enjoy it. So yeah, this is Girl Dinner for you. Trigger warning, cannibalism, but I would argue that there's not enough cannibalism in this book to warrant a trigger warning, but just be aware of that, Next up, in November, another very highly anticipated read, I read the sequel to When Among Crows, and this is To Clutch a Razor by Veronica Roth. This is the first book, When Among Crows, and again, if you watch the channel and if you watched any other of my videos, you know that I absolutely loved the first installment of this series, and the sequel is no exception. I think Veronica Roth is an amazing writer, and she set the action in this urban modern fantasy backdrop that I think works really well for these characters. The books themselves are very short. I think I wished them to be a bit longer than they are, but in the same time, I'm so in awe of what Veronica Roth achieved with stories under 200 pages, and they're really, really good if you typically like urban fantasy. If not, I don't think that these books are going to change your opinion on that, but for what they are, I think they are really, really well done. Obviously, I will not talk in depth about the second book just because it would spoil the first one, but the main gist of things is that these books are inspired by a lot of Polish folklore stories and folk tales, and you have a lot of influences from the Polish popular stories in that aspect, and you are following this ragtag group of individuals as they are trying to do something. You are dealing with a lot, or rather, they are dealing with a lot of familial trauma, and they might discover that what they were told and what they were taught in their respective families is not entirely factually true. They might discover that the world is bigger and more complex than what they previously thought. So this is When Among Crows, and the book that I actually read in November, To Clutch a Razor by Veronica Roth. Next up, I did read a short story, and me and short stories don't usually like gel well, but every once in a blue moon, there is a short story that I really, really like. I think this one is not really that. I think it was fine. I'm talking about All Manner of Things Shall Be by Olivia Blake. This is part of the Time Traveler's Passport short story collection from Amazon. They do these short story collections with like really popular authors, I think a couple times a year. I know they have one for romance short stories, and they also had one last year or 2 years ago. It's called Into Shadow, and that short story collection contains one of my favorite ever short stories from Alexi Harrow. It is called The Six Deaths of the Saint. And slight tangent, Alexi Harrow recently came out with a story called, or with a book called The Everlasting, and that book is inspired from The Six Deaths of the Saint that I have right there on my TBR card, and I'm very excited to read in the month of December. But tangent aside, so All Manner of Things Shall Be by Olivia Blake. This is kind of in the realm of sci-fi fantasy, time traveling story. I don't really do well with time traveling stories. The one that comes to mind is The Ministry of Time by Killian Bradley, and that was not my thing at all. I ended up selling my collector's copy. But this short story from Olivia Blake, we are basically following a cast of characters that are kind of friends but kind of enemies, and they so happen to be vampires, and they are trying to answer to a very existential and philosophical question, let's say. It is very short. I think it's like 35 pages, something like that. I read it in an hour, I believe. And because of this short story, I also renewed my KU subscription. And later on in the month, that turned out to be a very bad idea because of a book that absolutely scarred me. All Manner of Things Shall Be was just okay. I would really like to have this story in like a novel in like 300 pages to really get to know these characters and their motivations and stuff like that, and to really spend time alongside them and their friends and their decisions that they make and stuff like that. But yeah, this was a short story and it was okay. All Manner of Things Shall Be by Olivia Blake. Speaking of Olivia Blake, I did finally read the conclusion to the Atlas 6, and this is called the Atlas Complex. So if you don't know, the Atlas 6 is a trilogy a fantasy trilogy, and how do I even explain what this trilogy is about? So basically, in the first book, you are following these 6 characters who were specifically chosen by Atlas Blakely to be part of the Alexandrian society. And in this world, the Library of Alexandria never burned, and its knowledge got preserved, and this secret society is basically tasked with protecting that knowledge from the Alexandrian library. But we might find out that Atlas's motives are not exactly what we thought they were at the beginning of that book. Towards the end of the first book of the Atlas 6, we might find out that Atlas's motives are not entirely good and truthful, and are not entirely what we thought they were at the beginning of the book. And we learn what he intends to do with the library, with the knowledge from the library, and also with these 6 people. And the story kind of like gets very existential and complicated. This book, I mean, we were warned from the beginning that someone will die. I just didn't expect to be this specific person. I also didn't want to be this specific person, but also in the same time, I'm like, okay, but how else would this trilogy conclude, you know? So I am still a bit conflicted with this book and with the ending of this trilogy. I do think it is way too long. This is over 600 pages, and I don't think it should be this long. I think 300 pages would have been fine, but you know, it is what it is. I would even go so far to say that this is probably, potentially, my least favorite Olivia Blake book. And I don't say this lightly, because Olivia Blake has one of my favorite books of all time, has written one of my favorite books of all time, One for My Enemy. And I typically really like her writing style and the choices that she makes in her books, but this was unfortunately just not something that I think worked for me personally. So this is the Atlas complex, and I also don't think this is a controversial take, because a lot of people really don't like this book. I'm not quite there yet. Like, I didn't like it, but I don't dislike it, if that makes sense. It was just kind of disappointing, you know. This is the Atlas complex. Next up, I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. A couple of months ago, I got introduced to the Bronte sisters' works, and I read Jane Eyre and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and Agnes Grey, and I was like, I might as well read Wuthering Heights also. This was my least favorite book from the Bronte sisters. I did not like the characters at all, and you could argue that that is the point of the book, because these characters are very annoying and make terrible decisions. I just didn't care. After like 150 to 100 pages, I was just like, you know what? This is just boring, and I don't care what's happening with these characters. I was expecting a gothic story, and I just got bored while reading this. Yes, the writing style is beautiful, but I don't think that the writing style saves the decisions that these characters are making and the overall plot of this book. So it just ended up not being something that I gravitate towards, and I almost DNF'd this book a couple of times, but I was very close to finishing it, so I was like, you know what, I started it, I read a good chunk of it, so I might as well just finish it. I don't think it was worth it, and yeah, not for me, not for me. I am excited to see the movie potentially next year, and also to listen to Charlie XCX's soundtrack album that she's doing for the Wuthering Heights movie, but the book didn't work for me, unfortunately, and I'm really curious to see if I will ever reread this, if my opinion is going to change, because I also think that I was not really in the mood to read this book, and I read it just because, as I said, I already started it and I made like a good progress with it, so I was like, I might as well finish it, but I was not truly in the mood to read it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, this is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Next up, I read Misinterpretation by Lydia Soga. This was longlisted for the Booker Prize 2025. It didn't win, but it got longlisted. And out of all of the books that were longlisted for the Booker Prize this year, this was the only one that really spoke to me from the blurb and from what I knew about it. So I was really excited to read it. And I read it and I just wished more from this book. Like, I just wanted more from the characters and more from the prose. It is true that there are specific passages in this book that really, really resonated with me. I even dog-eared some pages and like underlined some passages and stuff like that. But for the most part, this ended up being just okay. I was not that impressed by this book. So in this book, we are following our nameless character. I'm pretty sure she doesn't have a name, or at least we don't find out what her name is throughout this book. But she is from Albania and she currently lives in New York with her husband. She made, her family and her roots in the United States. And because she is from Albania, she speaks obviously Albanian, English, but she also speaks Spanish and Italian, I believe, and she works as an interpreter. One day, this guy Alfred needs her help to interpret for him at the dentist. She goes with Alfred to the dentist, she helps him with the paperwork and stuff like that, and they really seem to hit it off. Alfred grows more and more infatuated with our main character. After that, Alfred asks our main character to interpret for him in his therapy sessions because he has these really, really horrible nightmares. He cannot sleep at night. And him being a torture survivor, obviously he's dealing with a lot of things mentally, so he needs an interpreter for his therapy sessions. Our main character is pretty reluctant to accepting that just because Alfred's mom's story and her mom's story are quite similar, and in the interpreter's guidebook, handbook, I don't know what it's called, but it clearly states that if you are finding yourself in a similar situation with the person that you're supposed to interpret for, you shouldn't accept the job because obviously that's gonna mess you up mentally. But because she really wants to help Alfred, she takes on the job, and that kind of unravels a series of events in her personal life. She's dealing with a lot of issues in her marriage with her husband, and he's arguably an asshole, but he also wants to help her. It's just weird. Long story short, she has to go back to Albania to her mom to visit her mom, and there's this beautiful passage of her going back to Tirana and seeing the city for the first time in like a very long time, and seeing all of these people that she used to know in her childhood and stuff like that, and that leads her to a path of self-discovery and trying to fix her life and what's not working in her marriage. And speaking of that, I want to read you a passage from when she arrives in Tirana. She says, "A row of buildings striped in blue and yellow flashed by. We had entered the city center. In Tirana, bright, eye-catching designs were painted diligently over the drab, communist-era apartment buildings. The artistic experience wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Why not let the ugliness show, some locals said. It's there, isn't it? It lacks dignity, this city dressed up like a candy cane. But to me, Tirana's colorful facade recalled the advice therapists often offer to depressed patients. Go ahead and smile. Fake it if you must. You'll feel better eventually. Tirana was a city appearing to be fine, a city on the lookout for happier days. Those blotches of paint were a makeshift declaration of hope." For some reason, that passage really resonated with me. It is something that I feel when I'm going back home. And yeah, you have a lot of descriptions like these that really make you feel a certain type of way. And I really liked those aspects of the book. But yeah, I just really wished a bit more from our main character and from how this book ended. The ending was not necessarily my thing, and I just wished for something a bit different for the ending of this book, but nonetheless, I think this is worth the read. It's just not something, amazing, let's say. So this is Misinterpretation by Lydia Soga. Do you remember how I said that I kind of regret renewing my KU subscription? This book is the reason why. So I knew about the existence of this book, and I knew that some people read it and had some very funny takes on this book. And granted, the synopsis of this book sounds weird, but also very hilarious. So I was like, you know what? I might as well read it. And this book is Unhinged by Vera Valentine. When I tell you that this book traumatized me so much, this is probably one of the worst books that I have ever read. And I don't say that a lot. I don't know why this book exists. It is granted very short, like it's 90 pages or something like that. I read it in an afternoon, and I very deeply regret my decision of picking it up. So, Unhinged is basically the story of a girl who fucks her door. Yeah, you heard that right. And somehow the door is the son of Zeus, and the door has to make the girl have sex with the door so that he can be transformed into a guy. And I don't know how this author did this, but somehow the sex scenes between the door, who's now a guy, and the girl are even cringier than the sex scenes between the girl and the door. It was pretty rough. And let me actually read you some passages just so that you understand what I'm talking about. I cannot believe I'm putting this on the internet. So at the beginning of the book, the author says Unhinged is a paranormal romance. I think paranormal is used very, very lightly in this quote. So Unhinged is a paranormal romance story that involves a human woman getting it on with her front door, which later turns into a guy. That's pretty much the gist of things. And just for reference, I did picture the door having the voice of Ben Starr. If you know, you know. But unfortunately, that didn't save the cringiness of these quotes. Okay? So, you have quotes like, "It may have been when I noticed the care she always took sliding the key into my lock." Or, "Even though I was, architecturally speaking, obligated to support her, I still felt like I was actively providing her comfort. The thought of that worn me down to my threshold." And La pièce de résistance, "Wrapping my round brass protrusion in a soft cloth and a firm grip, she started polishing my knob with slow, smooth strokes that stirred something deep in my wood." I don't think I need to say more. I just deeply regret my decision of reading this book, and I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but this was objectively bad, okay? Like, you cannot tell me that this book is well written, because it is not. Moving along from that horrific book, I also started reading a fantasy series that I wanted to read for a really long time, but I was just scared by the sheer amount of pages that these books have. I'm obviously talking about the Stormlight archive, and in November, I did read The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Edgedancer. And let me talk about the first book, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I am so happy that I finally got to start reading the Stormlight archive. This book is amazing. The second book is even better, if you can believe it, but this first book is absolutely amazing. The first kind of like half of the book, you read about these characters and you don't really understand what's happening to them or why they act the way that they act. But when you reach probably the last 100 pages of this book, everything comes together so nicely. It opens up the plot so much for the sequel and for the upcoming books, and it also makes you realize that every scene that you read in this book is relevant. With big books like this, I'm always very reluctant and I'm thinking, well, was that really necessary? Like, couldn't you say the same story in half as many pages? And it turns out that every word in these books was absolutely necessary for the plot and for the character development, for the magic system, for the world building, for everything. This was absolutely marvelous, and I am so happy I finally started reading the Stormlight Archive. To tell you a bit about what these books are about and what's happening in the first book, very briefly. I'm not even scratching the surface of what happens in this book, but we are following three main characters. On one side, we have Kaladin. He is a soldier, but at the present time, he is a slave, and he wants to escape his current situation, but also he gets kind of like entangled in this war. And he obviously wants to escape the war. He wants to be free. He doesn't want to be a slave anymore. But in order to do that, he might have to do the things that he's most afraid of. We learn a lot about Kaladin's past in this book, about his family, his brother, his parents, and his very deep trauma when it comes to certain events that happened to him in the past. And you truly don't fully understand why these events are relevant for him until probably the second book, until Words of Radiance. But when you do finally see what he's doing and why he's doing the things that he's doing, it's absolutely insane. Then on the other side, you also have Dalinar. Dalinar is the brother to the king, but the king was brutally murdered by the assassin in white. So now the king is Dalinar's nephew. The problem is that this new king obviously doesn't have any sort of experience when it comes to ruling a kingdom, and he is very young and naive, and Dalinar kind of has to take it upon himself to shape the decisions that his nephew is taking for the kingdom overall and to protect the people in their kingdom. And they are at war with these Parshendi creatures, people. They're not really people, but anyway, I don't want to get into that. But they're at war with Parshendi, and again, you truly don't understand why this war exists until Words of Radiance. But when you finally do, everything starts to make so much sense retrospectively. Also, we have the point of view of Shallan. Shallan is a scholar, and she traveled wide and far to become the apprentice of Yasna Colleen. Yasna Colleen is the sister of the current king, the unexperienced one. And Yasna Colleen is an amazing scholar. She's doing research that no one else is doing. She's also not really faithful in their religion, and she is convinced that something happened along their history that they don't know about, because a lot of things don't really make sense, a lot of things that they are told that they should believe in. And Shallan wants to be Yasna's apprentice because obviously she's a scholar, but on top of that, she might have some hidden motives for that decision. And that's everything I think I can say without spoiling what happens in this book and in the next one. But these characters are so well portrayed. I love how Brandon Sanderson chose to tell us this story, and I think he excels at like magic systems and character building. The prose is very simple. It is easy to understand. You don't have to do like mental gymnastics to understand what he's saying or what he's trying to say. This was really good. And as I said, the second book in the Stormlight Archive that I read in November, Words of Radiance, is even better than the first one, because this is when you truly start understanding what's going on and what's the relevance of some things that were either happening or very briefly mentioned in the first book, at least. Immaculate and Elite, Words of Radiance. I think this is my favorite one that I read so far in this series. I really liked Shallan's point of view in this book, and it was really well done. Also, in this book, we have an interlude about a character who we didn't meet yet, but her interlude, it is so fun and funny, and you just want to learn more about this character. And it turns out that Brandon Sanderson had the same thought, and we do learn more about that specific character in Edgedancer. This is Lift's story, and Lift is a very interesting character. She's supposed to be like 13 or 14, something along those lines. While I do think that Brandon Sanderson was capturing the essence of that age in this book, Lift is also very annoying in this book because she's just like repeating the same things over and over again. She has like a companion, and she continuously refers to this companion by the wrong title designation, or I don't even know how to say that without spoiling anything. But this other character, her companion, constantly tells her that, hey, this is not who I am. And she continues to refer to him as that. It's just kind of uncomfortable after a while, and it's just very juvenile, which again makes sense for her age, but it's just not a point of view that was that amazing for the entirety of this book, in my opinion. I'm very curious to see how Brandon Sanderson is going to integrate Lift's point of view moving forward into the Stormlight archive. I think if you balance it with the other points of view from the other characters, could work. So this was Edgedancer and the first two books in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. And that's it. These are all of the books that I read in November. I also wanted to show you what I am currently reading. This is T. Kingfisher's newest release. This is Snake Eater. I think it is upside down. Yes. Snake Eater. There you go. You already know by now probably, but T. Kingfisher is one of my favorite authors ever, and I read so many T. Kingfisher books this year, it's crazy. But I was so happy when I found out that she will have a new book coming out, and I got this on release day, and I'm very, very happy to read it. I did not read a lot from this book. I'm only on page 29 because yesterday I was kind of tired, and I decided to just stop and enjoy this book when I can. Hopefully I can read like a good chunk of this today, but I did not read the blurb of this. I just saw T. Kingfisher new release, add to cart, and that was it. So far we are following our main character, Selena, I think it's her name. Potentially, I'm so horrible with names. Yes, her name is Selena, and Selena has a very mysterious past from what it seems. She just hit rock bottom. She doesn't have any money. She doesn't have any job, and she goes to find her aunt. Now, the problem is her aunt lives in this very small town, and she doesn't have her aunt's address. She only knows the name of the town where she supposedly lives. She takes the train there. The town is like in the middle of the desert, and she unfortunately finds out from the lady that works at the post office that is also the mayor and the police, and she's doing some other like funny jobs in this small town. But anyway, she learns from this lady that her aunt unfortunately passed away a year ago. Seeing that Selena is very distraught, the lady from the post office suggests that she can spend the night in her aunt's house because no one claimed the house just yet, and it is empty anyway, so Selena could spend technically, theoretically, the night there. She doesn't really know what to do, but in the end she accepts because she thinks about the fact that she doesn't have any money and the train is not going to be in this town for another day or two, I think. So she decides to go to this house. What is really weird about the houses in this town is that neither of them have numbers. They are all named like something. For example, the house that's behind the church is named the one behind the church. Or Selena's aunt's house is called the Jackrabbit Hole House, I'm pretty sure. Yes, Jackrabbit Hole House. So there seems to be something going on in this small town, and I am sure that we will learn more from Selena as she spends more time in this town. She also has a black Labrador called Copper, which is very funny, and she's the sweetest dog ever. I just love Selena and Copper so much already, and as I said, I'm only 30 pages in, so very excited to get to read this one today and maybe finish it tomorrow, but we'll see about that. In November, I also had a very well-deserved break from work, and during those days, all I did was reading, crocheting, and playing Pokemon, as one does. And very exciting news, I finally finished my orange blanket. I am so happy that I finally managed to finish my first ever crochet project. I actually think I talked about starting this crochet project when I talked about another T. Kingfisher book, which is wild. I think it was A Sorceress Comes to Call, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I finally finished that blanket. It is actually on the chair behind me. Let me quickly go and grab it. And not to toot my own horn, but I am very happy with how it turned out. I just decided to fold it and put it on the chair for the moment because I'm just scared to use it now that it's finally finished. Also, I did find this really cool kind of like border edging for this blanket, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. Let me quickly show it to you. I don't know how much of this is visible on the camera, but this is how the edges look like, and I am so happy with the results, even though it did take me quite some time to do this border. I just love it. I just love it so much. I actually posted a photo of this on Threads, and the responses from everyone were absolutely crazy. I think it is the post with the most amount of likes and comments and blogs, reposts, whatever it's called. And I'm just like so happy about it. The people seem to be really enjoying this blanket. And yeah, excited to see what I will do next with my crochet skills that I acquired this year. But for the foreseeable months, I think I'm just gonna take a break. Okay, now I am truly done. Thank you all so much for watching and for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, do all of the things if you want to do that and to support me and the channel. Please let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite book that you read in November or like recently, and also what are you currently reading. I would like to know that. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon with a new video here on the channel. Bye everyone, take care.